people that I've worked with in the past all have different approaches to what works with them, which is what makes strategy so exciting to me. I think what I love about it most is getting to take something that feels really narrow and sometimes with problems, and kind of bringing it up to a higher level, really seeing what some of those big influential trends are around the objective or the problem we're solving for clients, and maybe take a path that they had not thought about, and kind of looking at it that way. So I really like to broaden what I'm looking at in terms of going outside the category, going outside the industry, looking at audience behaviors and all of this stuff that can really influence really cool and good work. And just, kind of creating the narrative from there. I think that's how you get to really cool work, is not putting yourself in a box and always being open to thinking of things differently and thinking, what if this is something we could latch on to? There could be a really cool story there.
In the marketing world, when do you think it's obvious that strategy is lacking, or if there was a strategy, it's not the right one? When do you think the sort of spidey senses go up and they're like, we don't have it?
It's almost like this feeling where you can just tell. It's almost like the obvious a little bit. I feel like when it's a little too obvious, it doesn't feel right to me. I think there's a lot of easy ways and a lot of easy paths to take, but that's not necessarily what I like doing most of the time. Sometimes I just stumble upon something and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, it's just kind of like this spark in the work that you're doing. It's a spark where you can really find that insight and you're like, wow, it's something someone says in an interview, and you're like, that's it. That just like hits me. So I think it's definitely something that isn't obvious. I think good strategy work isn't always what meets the eye. It's something that's a little beyond what we all kind of know, but it just gives it a little more spark to it, a little more like energy in the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to work with creatives or other marketers where once they have the strategy in hand, like, I guess, what's the conversation that you're hearing from them? Or are they saying, oh, it's just another thing that we've got to do? Or, oh, this is going to save me time? Or, oh, you just saved me from going down a bunch of dead end paths? Like, what's the conversation typically?
I think it's like, is this a really good launch pad for creative work? I think that's something that creatives want to be inspired by the strategy too, because I think when strategy just kind of feels like an everyday thing that you can find, it's not exciting, like a job of a strategist is to inspire creatives to make the insight really exciting. And that's kind of how I like to I think of myself as a creative sometimes, because strategy in itself is creative, and it kind of is like this dual language between like finding the balance of research and creativity, which I love, and just finding that sweet spot. So I think those conversations with creative, you kind of have to have that like-minded creative brain a little bit in terms of making it inspiring, making it exciting, and seeing if it's something that they can actually work with. I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I feel like one of the worst feelings is if you are working on a strategy and you think it's getting pretty close, and then you can just tell, like, this isn't going to do anything for anybody. Like, nobody's going to have confidence in it. Nobody really wants to pay it off. They're going to go off and try to find something else, right? They're like, all right, that's all you got. I'm going to go do it myself, I guess. The best feeling though is when you get something and everybody's like, okay, this is exciting. Tons of confidence that this is going to work. And now we don't want to drop the ball from this. Like, we feel like this is hit up on a really high level. Okay, now the execution of it really has to be paid off. Like, we want to do justice to this sharp idea. That's the fun part.
Yeah. And I even find myself sometimes, like, in some of my first couple of projects here, like, I've even found myself being like, is this the right way that I want to go? I feel like that like level of doubt never goes away, in terms of like, man, are they going to like this territory? Is this like receptive? And sometimes clients end up loving it. And so I think a huge part of it too is not getting in your head too much about it, because there, like I said, there's so many ways that you can attack a problem and find a solution for it. Um, so I think a big part of that is also going with your gut, and just like that feeling that you have when something is really good, which is almost like indescribable and it's kind of weird, but I always try and look for that feeling in what I'm doing. Like, does this actually feel right? And something that I'm proud of too, you know?
Okay, so I'll admit that when I was earlier in my career, I definitely had doubts, and I always felt like sort of judgment on me as a person was on the line when sharing these ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's what this means, but over time, I don't know if it's confidence or being blinded, or maybe even a negative, but now it's more like I'm sort of serving the idea. Once you get the idea and you know it's the idea, it's like you're in service to the idea. It has nothing to do with you. It's like this idea is it's not obvious maybe, but you when you think it's right, it's like, okay, this is the idea, no
Mhm.
doubts. This is the idea. We've gone through the traps. We've heard from a lot of different people. It's not one person's opinion. It's almost like all signs are pointing to this. And so in those cases later on in my career, it was never a doubt, and it was never a reflection on me, because it wasn't me. I was just like stewarding this idea through and wanted to make sure that it got there. And I think that was a mindset shift. And I haven't really thought about that until you started talking about that, because I'd forgotten about, kind of the early days where I was like, oh, are they gonna tell me this is not right,
Right. Yeah, I
So
think I always wonder if it's like being young too, a little bit. And, I'm in like the first little part of my career and like figuring it out. And that level of like perfectionism, I think, is there a little bit too. Like, you're like, I want to get this right. But I think also being okay with, hey, like, we didn't get it right. We might be on the right track. And what does that look like? How do we move forward from that?
well, I talked to Haley about this the other day, and said we have a really good track record with this, and do we run the risk of becoming arrogant because we've had a good track record? And she basically said, no, I don't think we will. We're just resilient. If it's not right, we're going to keep working on it until it is right. And so it's
Yeah.
just inevitable. It's just how long does it take to get there? And I think I agree with that. We're not going to mail it in, so
Hmm.
we're just going to keep attacking it until we know it's that right, and we have a bar that we know it needs to get above.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that in some ways that's almost like that takes a little bit of pressure off of our shoulders, because we know, like, if the first few things that come to us that it's not gonna work, we're just gonna keep going on it and we'll get there.
Hmm. Yeah. And I
Do you
think
relate
that's
to
the
that
fun.
idea of do you relate to that idea of resiliency on that in that type of work?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. And you talking about resilience, I think in strategy is a huge part of it, because going back to your earlier point about, how do you communicate like with creatives and what are they looking for? Kind of that, like, also getting clients to understand the messaging and the positioning that we're doing. Language is a huge part of it. And I think coming to those right words as a strategist, I think that's where a lot of like my brain space is a lot of the time. Like, I have a territory and idea of where I want to go, but what are the words associated with that? And I do think that takes a lot of resilience to actually nail down this like place in your head that you're trying to go to, because words are so weird that way. Like, you feel like you have the word, and then the next day I wake up in the morning and I'm like, that's not the right word. What was I thinking at 4 p.m. on, Thursday afternoon? So I think kind of that like longevity, the resilience, the being able to have the time to like work through something too is super important as a strategist. Um, just to keep making it better and making those refinements and getting to the spot where clients and creatives see the work and see it in a really awesome place.
Yeah, there's strategy and words are so interconnected,
Hmm.
and you can have in your mind this very loose direction that you think it needs to go, but if you can't articulate it and you can't get it down in a structured sentence or two, it's not there yet. And you might think you've convinced yourself you've got it there, but until you can articulate it, it's not there yet. And
Yeah.
there's something to that I can't quite put my finger on yet, but I'm learning over time. I'm still learning this, of just how much language has an impact on the directions that we take and how we could communicate complex
Mm-hmm.
ideas to other people. I think you could probably study that for years, actually.
Right. Yeah. I also think it's interesting. Like, I think a word means something to me and it can mean something completely different to you. You know, like the other day I was working on a strategy and it was talking about like personability and, you know, being personable. And I took that to like, you know, that means different things to different people in terms of the words you associate that with. So it's a really interesting area of like constantly evolving, constantly learning. And that's what I love about it. You know, I'm always learning something new. I'm always learning new words. I'm learning new trends. It's just kind of like this whole aspect of it never being the same, you know?
It's true. And people react very differently to certain terms and phrases and
Mm-hmm.
than other people do. And it takes you getting to know that type of perspective to understand, oh, that's a different way to look at something. And so what does that mean to us? What does it mean to the brand? Is that something we lean into, or is it something we stay away from? Or it's endlessly interesting to me.
Endlessly interesting. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So Lauren, you're still kind of in early days at Native. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you joined with expectations, and I think you had good conversations and even knew a few people. But how has it been? How has it lived up to expectations? How is it different than what you expected?
It's so interesting. I think back to, you know, my first initial conversations with like Haley and the team, and it's it felt so natural to what I'm experiencing now, which I don't think I've ever had that before in like an interview process where it just feels so, here's the job we want you to do, here's what we're looking for in a person, here's how we see you fitting in with our team, and then keep having those conversations, keep flowing. And then you get to your first day and it's almost the exact same vibe as it was in the interview, which is really cool. You know, coming in and being able to dive right into the work is something that I love. I've had places before where it's like, you know, take the first month to kind of just like figure it out and absorb. And I'm definitely the type of person who loves to absorb while I'm doing work. I feel like that's how I learn the best and how I can actually see processes working and flowing. So I really think that whole aspect of, you know, seeing the interview process and being in that and just having like natural conversations with people translates really well into our workplace, and just having that approachable nature to everyone too. I've never had that before either. It's really cool that I get to sit down with you and have a conversation, or other people on leadership, you know, having those conversations in my first couple of days. And just having that level of exposure, which is really cool. I love that aspect of it. Um, I think on the flip side of that, something I didn't expect was, even though I love diving into work so quickly, I don't know if I was expecting it because I've never experienced it before. So it's definitely a welcomed like feeling to already be doing things for clients in my first couple of weeks and getting to present to them. That's something I love doing, and getting to showcase my work and actually saying, hey, like in my first month here, I've been able to deliver positioning and messaging and all this really cool stuff. Um, and I love that about Native. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm sure some of that's just like a function of our size. It's just how we operate. I mean, we tend
Mm-hmm.
to hire people who know what they're doing, so there's not much fear that, like, yeah, turn them loose on a project and let's go. Like, what are we waiting for? You know, it's not like they
Mm-hmm.
need to learn their craft. They already know their craft. Here's a framework for how we go about it. Got it? Got that? Yep. All right, let's
Mm-hmm.
roll. And I agree. I think sitting around twiddling your thumbs sounds terrible. So
I know.
we don't want to
It's like,
torture anybody with that.
yeah, it's like that trust aspect of it too. You know, like we trust people to do our jobs. I think we've all been places where we've been micromanaged or felt like we actually can't do our jobs, or where there's higher politics above us that just feel like, hey, we're not doing this right now. I don't think that's not the air of the vibe here, which I love too. It's very much so like, I trust you if this is the direction you want to go. I believe in your expertise. I believe in your work that you're doing. Um, and let's see how clients react to it. Let's have a conversation about it. I think that's something super unique, and getting to work with so many people that I can just trust to give me the right tools and resources for the work that I'm doing, and also vice versa, is a really awesome feeling.
I think it's important that we trust by default. I've worked at places where we didn't trust each other, and the work wasn't very good. Why would it ever be?
Yeah.
How are you ever going to brainstorm? How are you ever going to pass off your ideas? Because you have to, like, to get to the really good work, I think you have to expose who you really are and how you really think, not just the professional side of you. If it's going to be strategic and if it's going to be creative, I think you have to, and you have to put yourself out there, because if you don't, then everything's going to be super vanilla and safe, and that's so boring. And
So
I don't think
boring.
it works. I don't think it works. So yeah, just this environment where we trust by default in every aspect and everything we do, I think is really critical for us doing good work, beyond the fact that it's enjoyable. It's way more enjoyable to work in that environment, but I don't think we can do good work without it. So we try to make sure that's been very intentional for us, is to keep that. And if we ever sense that we're losing that ability, then we try to address it right away. And so far, at 30 people, we're still in a good spot, which is a bit surprising. I thought that would start to fade a little bit and we'd be fighting against it, but we're still holding on to it, I think.
Yeah. And what goes along with that aspect of trust too is there's very little ego around people's work, which is a really interesting phenomenon to me, because I'm proud of my work, but I definitely want it to be the best it can be, and if someone has an idea or a path to go down that can get me to a better place, I want to hear it. I don't want to just be stuck in my own brain. So I think having that openness and in that aspect of collaboration, and not being so proud to change on the other hand of it, is really cool. And just that aspect of collaboration here at Native.
I think that's probably the lowest tolerance of any trait, is ego. And it shows itself in odd ways. We've had people who have joined, and I think they had to realize, oh, I have to squash this. Like I have had a bit of an ego, and I need to push that down. And I don't have to. I actually can get by without it. We've also had people in the past, years ago, who said, I don't know how to work in this environment. I can't succeed in this environment. And what they're saying is like, hey, I can't play the politics I want. And in some ways they're like, they're basically almost admitting, I do have an ego and I don't know what to do around here because none of you guys do. So like, I gotta go somewhere else, I'm like, yeah, fair enough. I agree with you, by the way. And so
I agree with you. It's crazy that people thrive in that environment, isn't it? Like,
sometimes it's what you learn. It's well-intended mentors sometimes teach that. I often hear people who've gotten well-intended advice that's good at other places, not good here, right? And it's like how to get ahead politically, and it is good advice in other places. It doesn't work here. They don't know how to apply it because it doesn't. The structure that they're trying to game doesn't exist here. It's different values and traits. So.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting concept, because I think coming out of school, I think we're all taught hey, climb the ladder, get those title changes, get all this stuff that can make you grow. And I think the past couple of years, I think being so early on in my career and having such a shift in the workforce in terms of COVID and how we work, I think that has really changed my perspective on growth, because I was so obsessed with title changes and things like that. But something that I've come to realize is that I actually want to be good at my job and growing in my skill set, no matter what my title is. I think titles they can mean anything at any different place. It's not like a one size fits all in terms of what we're called at the different places we work. So I think that's something that I think we chatted about this on one of my first days, and you were showing me this skill chart in terms of growth and what growth looks like here. That was super exciting to me, because it's actually tangible goals that I can set for myself, and I'm growing in my work and I'm growing here with the people around me, which is really awesome.
I actually have I'm not sure if I believe this or not, but I've started to wonder if titles are going to mean less in the future.
Yeah.
I kind of have a sense that maybe they will. Um, I also think one of the worst things in the world professionally is to have a big lofty title and position, but not have the skills to back it up, and everybody know it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the worst ways to go. And unfortunately, a lot of well-intended advice. Hey, climb that ladder, go up this very narrow path. That's a great way to get up to a top position and not have the skills to back it up. Because by the way, at the top, you need a wide variety of skills. Generalists do very well at the top, but to get there fast, you have to be a specialist. So it's worth rethinking. And I always admire people who understand that either naturally through their own experiences or just disregard what everybody's telling them and do what, feels right to them. I think that's a better way to go.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool to talking with like my friends and colleagues about it too. Like, I think we see things differently, maybe as a generation than people who came before us in terms of like what work looks like and, how we're influenced by stuff around us. So I think we genuinely, want to have jobs where we're doing what we want to be doing and we're growing in the skill sets that we're excited about. And I definitely feel that here. I feel like I've gotten to a place where I'm working on a lot of really cool things and different things that bring different aspects of my brain into play, which is really fun. It's definitely a growth opportunity that I'm really excited about to keep going and keep growing.
As an organization, we'd be much bigger and have all the metrics of bigger success to the outside world if we had less variety of clients and services. And we don't do it partially because it's more interesting to do the variety of things that we do. And I think there's a lot of value to that. Not only is it more interesting to us, but I think it keeps the really sharp people engaged and not bored. And also I think it makes for better results for our clients because we're not recycling ideas. We're never recycling ideas. It's very rare that we can mail it in and just recycle the last idea to the next client. And so I think we really attack every problem with a very sharp and engaged mind. And I think it shows in the work. And what was the risk of that? We probably didn't grow as fast as we could have grown, but I think we've grown fast enough. I don't think we need to go any. I think we're fine on that front. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. I think we all have those days where our brains don't work on certain topics or on certain clients even. Like I definitely know I wake up and I'm like, I cannot think about that today. So I'm going to work on something else. And I think that's a perfect point to what you said about keeping our mind sharp, leaning into really where you're at that day and being able to have variety in the way you think and how you approach problems and, listening to yourself in terms of, hey, like I can do this today and I'm going to be really awesome at it, and I'll save that other thing for later in the week or tomorrow. I think that's an aspect of variety that I haven't really experienced before. And it's going really well for me. I really like it. It's making me feel not like I'm doing the same thing every day and not like I'm just getting to know one client or one industry or one market, but a way broader sense of anything that I've had it in my previous roles on clients.